Hi, my name is Gene. Let me tell you about the Chinamid podcast. Now, the reason I created this podcast is because I think we're in unprecedented times in relations between the world's two largest superpowers, the United States and China. And my goal is to help improve US-China relationships one individual at a time by helping more Americans better understand how the Chinese people think, why they behave the way they do, and what can be done to create new interaction patterns and better outcomes. So what is the Chinamid podcast? Well, first of all, it's a normal podcast that you can listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And season 1 has 10 episodes. Now, each episode also includes a listener's guide so you can understand what are the key questions that are being asked, and also Chinese concepts and terms that will help you better understand what you're dealing with when you're doing business in China. Now, each episode is also published to Kindle Vella as a short story, so you'll be able to read the podcast if listening is not your ideal form of consuming content. And then, of course, every Tuesday, we do a YouTube live recap Q&A of the latest episode, so you can ask me questions about anything, the characters, the concepts, whatever it is that you think you need more guidance with understanding. And then I also create what I call YouTube Shorts, which are 60-second videos that really just dive deep into one particular concept that's going to help you on this journey. Okay? Now, how are we going to achieve all of the things that we're talking about? First, we need a conceptual framework for understanding the Chinese arena. After all, the goal is to play and win the China game inside the Chinese arena. So we first have to have a conceptual framework of what it is we're dealing with. So we have to understand the difference between the things we know and the things we don't know, but also the things we don't know, or unknown unknowns, and what's even the most dangerous or false known knowns, which are things that we think we know, but are actually false in the Chinese cultural context. Next, we want to try to activate and condition key innate abilities that we all have. And very simply, it's curiosity and imagination. So if we can activate more positive imagination, this will enhance our ability to be empathetic to the people that we're working with in China. It increases our capacity to give them the benefit of the doubt as opposed to judging them, which is why we also have to have purpose-driven curiosity, which is the gateway to developing greater awareness. Now, the next aspect of this journey is to develop what I call essential skills. Essential skills are basically greater awareness and greater empathy. Now, empathy means knowing how others feel and why they feel the way they do. And this will enable you to unlock possibilities to connect on a deeper level. And awareness includes not just cultural awareness, which we'll talk about, but it also includes self-awareness about how you are perceived by your Chinese counterparts and situational awareness. And this will enable you to discover new ways to win. Now, once we develop these essential skills, it's time to adjust our strategy. Our strategy is basically how we think about what's going to work and what's not going to work. So it's a combination of our mindset, which is continuously evolving based on how we better understand China and our evolving perspective and worldview. Now, this can either attract somebody or repel somebody. So we really want to develop one that's conducive for China. And then, of course, how does that lead to the adjustment of our attitude? Because this is what people care about at an emotional level. And you're going to discover that Chinese people are very emotional. So your attitude matters more than what you say. And then finally, it's executing winning tactics based on all the things that we're developing and creating. And what does that mean? That means based on a different attitude and different mindset, we're able to develop a different approach. We're able to portray a different persona. And ultimately, we're able to create new communication patterns that will enhance and strengthen our mutual trust and collaboration. All right, so when you look at the 10 episodes of the Chinamid podcast, so again, this is season 1. For each one, we're going to have a listener's guide or a learning guide, but each episode focuses on something in a progression that will help you really understand how to play and win the China game. For example, the first episode talks about Guanxi, and this will really explain to you in a very nuanced way how they operate. This is how Chinese society works, and this is how Chinese mindset conditions Chinese people to operate. Li Yi is what they consider. Yin Yang, or Yin Yang, you might call it in English, really helps you understand that being successful in China is not black and white. It's basically how you manage the different shades of gray. Then also we need to talk about what are the cultural dichotomies. How do Chinese people use art of war tactics, and what art of war tactics can you use in order to gain an advantage? Of course, you can't develop Guanxi without understanding how to give face. And you can't understand how to give face if you don't understand the Chinese iron rice bowl mentality. That is the undercurrent, or kind of deeply embedded in how Chinese people think, even though younger generations of Chinese people may not portray the same characteristics as their older aunts and uncles that work at state-owned enterprises, but there are still elements of the iron rice bowl mentality everywhere in China that you might not be aware of. Wei Chu, again, talks about how Chinese people feel. You can't develop empathy unless you understand how they feel, so episode 7 is an anatomy of accidental Chinese grievances by really focusing on how they feel when you say or behave a certain way. Xing Tai is really understanding their attitude. If you can understand their attitude, then you know how they will look at certain things that either you are proposing or that you are doing. Ultimately, we want to influence their thinking. And this episode 9 is how do we understand their thinking? It's a complex web of competing emotions, and how do you identify which ones are dominant and how you can influence them? And then finally, when you want to make your journey into China more successful and more rewarding, you have to understand how to preserve face. Not only how to preserve your own face, but how to allow others to preserve their face, because ultimately they're going to do something that either you don't agree with, and if you're representing a company in China, they're going to do something that you believe is wrong. And the question is, how do you allow them to preserve face and have an off-ramp to pivot and do something that's more aligned with what you expect and what you desire? Again, this is the journey that I want to take you through in the Chinamid podcast. So I hope you can subscribe and listen, and let me know your thoughts, and share this with anybody that you think may benefit from this journey.